Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well and is having a good beginning to 2024. As I said in the 2024 video, the Year of the Dragon, it's going to be a very fast and potent year this year. So if you haven't already looked at that video, it might be worth going across and finding it. And I'll put the link in the description below. Now, today's video, I'm going to be looking at, is there going to be a pause in the USA government in 2024 going forward around the time of the election? So we'll be looking at election 2024. Going to be looking at whether there's going to be some sort of continuity of government and what is going to be in store for Trump with all this talk about having him removed from ballots, particularly in this strong year of the dragon. And I'm going to be looking at the difference between what is the one world government and the worldwide military peace plan. So I hope that you really enjoy all the information that we're going to be talking about today. So the first subject I wanted to look at was around where Juan O'Savin had said before Christmas something around that there was going to be a 4-year pause in the USA in terms of a pause in government. And so I wanted to know when Juan O'Savin refers to the 4-year pause, is he referring to the new setup which we have talked about previously called Project 25, which is going to be a transition project into the new setup? So I asked them, when 107 refers to the 4-year pause, is he referring to the new setup Project 25? And they said no. They said that one is referring to halting political elections until a fair system is devised, a fair process. And I said, what fair process is he referring to? And I said, is it a system overseen by, say, military cybersecurity like Delta or the Space Operations Command, which is something I've spoken about in previous videos? And they said it's yes and no. They said that Juan O'Savin is referring in part to removing all elected leaders through elections in 2024 so that people can see how the USA could be effectively run under military law whilst being protected by Space Force Delta Space Operations Command. They're saying that military law may require troops on the ground, but it is anticipated that the framework of Project 25 will act as a template to start moving people to devolved methods of governance, not government. And they said there is a difference between governance and government. And they said that people will be able to witness and experiment with self-governance. So, for example, that would be devolution of governance through decentralization of power to we the people. And it would be overseen by the Space Force Delta Space Operations Command. And where the systems require any quantum or computer infrastructure. So for example, you would need to have a quantum and computerized infrastructure where you are now devolving voting to a localized, decentralized system. So I said, so how are the general populace going to respond should this strategy go ahead? This strategy of pausing the government, removing all elected leaders and running on a self-governance based system with the military in the background, so running under military law. And they said it will, to the greater extent, be rolled out successfully. But they did say that there will always be factions who want to oppose any new systems or change. But to the greater extent, this rollout of Project 25 will be a success, and it will lead the populace towards a devolved setup whilst being protected and overseen by Space Force. So I wanted to have a little look at the definitions of and the differences between what is government and what is governance, because there's a distinct difference between how the new Project 25 and any pause in government is going to be running. So I said, what is the difference between government and governance? They said to me that government is a set of ruling principles as devised by an overseeing government or authority, usually an elected or self-elected organization or setup. They said that governance is a more broad structure of allowing people to broadly decide their own rules and directives, whilst providing a protection overlayer to avoid far-reaching factions destroying freedoms. So a more simplistic view would be that government is top-down or centralized, and governance is we the people, and it's decentralized. So I then pulled up a guide to continuity of government for state, local, tribal, and territorial governments. This was developed or printed in July 2021 and is part of the Department of Homeland Security. And their introduction and purpose to what is continuity of government is they're saying that everyday individuals, organizations, communities, and governments provide critical services and perform essential functions upon which citizens depend. And continuity of government ensures that the whole community has a plan for sustaining these services and functions when routine operations are disrupted. Implementation of continuity principles ensures that organizations, communities, and governments can support individuals during a crisis. And if you look at the figure above, the diagram, you'll see that what they're referring to is whole community continuity. And within that, they've got federal government, individual families and households, communities, non-governmental organizations or NGOs, the private sector entities and critical infrastructure sectors, local governments, state and territorial and insular areas of government, and tribes. So that's an overview to how this papers from the Department of Homeland Security describes continuity of government for the whole community. They go on to describe that the nation's continuity program and the continuity guidance is based on continuity of operations, continuity of government, and ensuring that constitutional government programs still run. And this collectively provides resilience for the performance of something called the National Essential Functions, or the NEFs. The NEFs, which, as you can see in the diagram, are the foundation of all continuity programs and capabilities and are the primary focus of a federal government before, during, and after a catastrophic emergency. The federal government maintains these functions and services with the support of the whole community partners, which was what we just saw in figure 1. The NEFs, the National Essential Functions, and the services with the support of the whole community partners create a collaborative effort with federal departments and agencies which are integrated with and supported by state, local, tribal, and territorial governments, the private sector, NGOs or non-governmental organizations, and the public. For that integration and support to be successful, then organizational essential functions should be identified by the whole community partners. So essential functions are like a subset of a day-to-day government and how it runs its critical activities. And then these essential functions are used to identify supporting tasks and resources that will then need to be included in the organization's continuity planning process. So in this next figure, you can see that an NEF 1 would be to preserve our constitutional government. NEF 2 would be to provide visible leadership. NEF 3 is to defend the country. NEF 4 is to maintain foreign relations. NEF 5 is to protect the homeland. NEF 6 is to provide emergency response and recovery. NEF 7 is to maintain a stable economy. And NEF 8 is to provide critical government services. So these are the national essential functions that would still need to be run through the whole community in the event of an emergency. So the continuity of these operations ensure that an individual organization can continue to perform its essential functions, provide services, and deliver its core capabilities during a disruption to routine operations. So continuity is the foundation on which continuity of government and enduring constitutional government capabilities depend. They're also saying that continuity of government is a coordinated effort within each of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. So in this diagram, you can see the layout of the enduring constitutional government, which is the executive continuity of government, the legislative continuity of government, and the judicial continuity of government. And all these together create an enduring constitutional government. And this enduring constitutional government, or ECG, is the result of a cooperative effort amongst the executive, legislative, and judicial branches to preserve the framework under which people are governed. So far, we have continuity of government and we have enduring constitutional government. And the two things have to be run side by side. Then this document goes on to talk about how governmental jurisdictions at all levels should establish a cross-functional continuity working group or groups that address intra- and inter-branch coordination, dependencies. And the composition of this group may vary by jurisdiction, but it should include planning, operational, and leadership representatives from all branches of government, neighbouring jurisdictions, and representatives from the various SLTT departments, agencies, bureaus, and other organisations which are deemed most critical to the continued functioning of the jurisdiction during an emergency. The SLTT stands for Guide to Continuity of Government for State, Local, Tribal, and Territorial Governments. Then in the next table, it shows us branches of government and their critical functions in the USA. So you have the executive branch, which gives us continuity of leadership, declaration of emergency. It implements a response operations and initiates emergency actions and authorities. They make emergency appointments, and they safeguard and protect resources, facilities, and personnel. Under the legislative branch, you have a continuity of leadership or succession, a continuity of legislative process. You provide authority for necessary government action. You ensure laws and support continuity of government emergency requirements. And you allow seat of government to move or operate virtually and modify quorum requirements. And then under judicial, you have continuity of leadership or succession, continuity of the court system. You ensure due process. You ensure checks and balances. You decide matters that arise due to the emergency. You prioritize court dockets and functions, and you ensure access to legal services. So under continuity of government, those three branches would run in that manner. So this document, I'll provide it in the description below, and you can read the full outlines of how the executive, legislative, and judicial branch would operate under continuity of government. So then the document then goes on to talk about emergency action steps, which could be, for example, scripted announcements or periodic reviews or updates or notifications or alerts, which would be used to contact designated executive, legislative, and judicial decision makers. There would be, for instance, procedures for declaring a state of emergency. There could be something like issuing a stay-at-home or a shelter order. It could be permitting local government personnel and property to be used outside of jurisdiction, and the list goes on. Again, I'll just put the full document in the description below. Other emergency resources could be where they allow different departments in the different branches of government to alternate their locations to include telework or virtual support. They could include, for instance, video teleconferencing or other communication methods. They could provide additional vehicles or power generation equipment and fuel, for example. They could provide, say, a Wi-Fi hotspot and a cell phone service, which includes portable temporary towers and other critical resources such as food and water or anything else that would be required to support the essential functions. So all of this can be read in detail in this document called Guide to Continuity of Government, and I'll put it in the details below. So going back to my channeling, it would seem that that would be what continuity of government would look like under normal circumstances. But what we might be looking at here, particularly with what we were talking about with regards to 107 and what I channeled, is that they might be removing elected leaders in an effort to allow people to have a decentralized form of governance where the people start to make their own decisions. So it looks like that in the future, even though there would be a continuity of government framework, it's looking more like some of those operations will be devolved down to the people via maybe the transition of Project 2025. So in the past, you would have had all of these functions overseen via those executive branches of government. And I'm not saying that that wouldn't still occur, but it seems like you'll have that plus some kind of system to devolve some of the decision making to the populace. So in the past, it would have just been the three branches of the executive, the three branches of government that were running the continuity of government. But in order to have governance, you need to decentralize some of that decision making. So what I think we're looking at in the future is, in the background, we're going to have a military law set up so that we have the military overseeing the whole process. And then there's going to be some kind of, it looks like some kind of divide between how much the government runs the continuity and how much is devolved down to the citizens through maybe something like Project 2025. And this is going to be a transition process. So it's all going to be new. It's going to be a new way of looking at government and governance. And it's going to be overseen by the military in terms of keeping it all safe. So in this sense, I think it means like in the cybersecurity sense. So that would be Space Force and Delta at the Space Operations Command, who through military law would be overseeing the functions running effectively during any time of emergency or disruption. So it'd be interesting to see how this unfolds, because before we understood about this new setup coming, that would be coming, if there had been a state emergency, you would have gone straight into continuity of government structure, which is everything I've just read out from that document. But now what we're going to be seeing, it seems like, is we're going to be seeing not just the old systems for overseeing functions, but we're going to see this new introduction of the people also being able to take on some of that responsibility. And in the background, the Space Force, Space Operations Command, and Delta are going to be overseeing the security of any cyber security. So that would be communications, for example. So this is going to be a very interesting process, because if they go ahead with this holding of this pause in government, this is effectively what I think we might be seeing going forward, this split in being overseen by government and being able to contribute from the level of the populace. So a devolved decision-making process. And whether Project 2025 will be that framework for the devolution to the populace, we'll have to wait and see. But I'm feeling like that's what's going to happen going into the latter part of 2024. We might start seeing some of what we thought were going to be our elected leaders being pulled back. They're going to be used in the future for the new setup once all of these systems have been redesigned and reallocated in terms of who's governing and how much the people are involved in that. So this is going to be a very interesting transition time. So then I asked again, what is ahead of us in the USA right now, like on a political level? And, you know, what events could cause this election of 24 to be cancelled or postponed, effectively causing like a pause in government. So what they said to me is it's not currently anticipated that the election of 24 will run in the normal way. And I said, normal way. And they said, it is anticipated that disruptions to voting procedures, rules, and equipment will cause the elections to be postponed, to be invalid, or even cancelled. So effectively, you would then have no leaders being elected. So that could be how we move into this situation of going into the polls. When you have no leaders elected, they're saying that then you have to bring in military law, but they're saying, albeit under the radar. So it looks like what they're saying is that the election will be disrupted, postponed, become invalid, or be cancelled. So now you'll have no elected leaders. And in that moment, you would then be under military law, albeit under the radar. And they're saying that Project 25 will be brought in more strongly as a template to the transition into the new setup of devolved governance to we the people, which is where you're doing decentralized voting for policy and not people. So you're voting for the policy that you want, not people to be elected. They said that going into 2024, things will become more confused as the election date approaches. And I said, why will it become more confused? They said, and I said, in what context will it become more confused? And they said that things that people had understood to be fact around things like January the 6th, the insurrection, it will be shown to them that this event was manipulated. And they said that more information will be shown around former presidential incumbents and how they have manipulated policy, finances, and used corrupt practices. And they said that as we head towards the elections of November 24, we will also see more Hollywood people speaking out in favor of Donald Trump as we start to move the narrative back to the center ground towards devolution of governance and a system for we the people. I said, so what is likely to occur at the elections of 2024? And they said that many fast moving events will come in and it will disrupt the election of 24, and it's likely to be cancelled or postponed, and it's going to leave the country in a state of limbo. Effectively, the military will oversee the continuity of governance and then in brackets, government. So that goes back to what I was talking about previously. I said, will the people know that they're under military law? They said the masses will not know or understand that they are being overseen or managed via military law. They will see it as a pause in voting whilst the systems are cleaned up. Project 25 will be used as a template for this transition. So then I said, but anything attached to President Trump, like Project 25, it will be seen as a transition to the right because Donald Trump is a Republican. They said, no, it is intended that Project 25 will become a dialogue via the Truth Social movement to promote freedom of speech and a move to the center ground. I said, what will happen to candidates like Robert Kennedy Jr., Ron DeSantis, etc.? What will happen to the candidates at that time? Will they fall away? And they said no. They said the candidates will help to lead the people forward in this new setup. And prominent Hollywood actors and music performers will also step forward to help promote and re-educate on the new setup via the Truth Social movement. They said, for example, you might see people like Oprah Winfrey, Tom Cruise, Justin Bieber, actors and doctors, singers coming forward to help with the transition. I said, so will President Trump be leading Project 25? And they said, no, it will be a collaboration of people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, different areas of expertise. And I said, so what will the role of the president be in 2024 going forward? And will he be a prominent voice, meaning President Trump? They said yes and no. They said President Trump will still be speaking out in his normal way, where appropriate, but the emphasis will be on local communities banding together to gain a local setup for procedure and policy. And this goes back to what I was talking about earlier with the continuity of government and continuity of governance. They're saying that the emphasis going forward is going to be on policy and not voting for people. So I said, but in real terms, what will lead people to take this direction? Because they're used to being led. And they said to me that this is where the pain may be felt as local communities start to realize that they need to take control and that big government is changing. And I said, this sounds like a precarious position. Many people cannot cope without authority and top-down direction. I said, won't there be uprisings, maybe violence and vigilante behavior? They said to me that in some cases, this is always the way in society, that there will be pockets of extreme behavior. They said, this is all part of the cultural change that will be driven forward by a somewhat ambiguous situation initially. And I said, ambiguous. They said initially it will look ambiguous and people will feel unsettled, frustrated, dazed, angry because of the lack of what they see as a lack of seeming direction. They said that the lack of clarity will cause people to band together to create new structure and policy. So then I said, so during this period of pause, what will happen with services like vital services? Will they still run? You know, like the rubbish, the hospitals, emergency services, media, banking. And they said, so these are all the systems that I outlined previously in the continuity of government document. And they're saying that to the greater extent, everything will still run business as usual. But however, in the background, the finances, policy, procedures will all be being restructured. So this is very interesting. So then I said, so who will be overseeing the allocation of, say, funds for, local services or governments or government services? They said that finances in the central locations will be overseen by the military through the continuity of government (governance). So again, they're talking about the system being split into two parts: the government, which is centralized, the governance, which is decentralized and overseen by the military. I said, how will the Truth Social communications platform be utilized during the pause? I talked about the Truth Social app being a military communications setup in one of my previous videos. I'll provide the link below. They said that the Truth Social platform is a military platform of communications which will be used as a peace broadcast system during the exponential restructuring ahead of us in 2024 and beyond. So then I said to them that in the Project 25 documents, it states that the 2025 presidential transition project paves the way for an effective conservative administration based on 4 pillars of policy agenda, presidential personnel database, presidential administration academy, and a playbook for the first 180 days of the next administration. And so I said to them, so this looks like an agenda for a Republican setup. I said, because it states it will pave the way for an effective conservative administration. Now, they said to me, there is a difference between being a Republican, which is right wing, and having a conservative approach to politics, which implies that you have a more centered approach and that you're moving towards center ground. So they're saying there won't be any left or right in a conservative approach. So I said to them, so really what we could call it is a moderate approach. And they said, no, it's an approach based on keeping politics in the center ground by allowing devolution of governance. So then recently I saw that Trump had posted a photo of himself with the military in the background. And I wanted to know, was this to show that he is commander-in-chief, or that the USA is under military law, or under continuity of governance or government? And they said, all the above. They said that Donald J. Trump was brought into the forefront of the USA to act as a sting operation, whilst in the background, the corrupt administrative, financial, and political systems were collapsed. They said on a broader scale, the media is also being restructured to allow for freedom of speech. However, the initial extremes of what could potentially occur should these systems not be collapsed has to be witnessed by the citizens who are still not awake to the dark, corrupt matrix of power that had been gaining considerable momentum since the assassination of JFK Kennedy in the 60s. So they said, so in real terms, people will still be seeing the harmful effects of wars started by corrupt governments, control through the Federal Reserve and CBDC, which is not to be confused with the centralized banking of the digital currency through the quantum virtual vault. but people will still, in the beginning, have to see that CBDC run under Federal Reserve will not benefit them. They also need to see that the climate emergency narratives are all by design, along with pushing extreme gender narratives and many further opposing and controlling narratives, which were headed towards a one world government, Agenda 2030, will also be witnessed. They said that the white hats are in control and the white hat military, i.e. Delta, but the Agenda 2030 narrative still has to be rolled out in places to raise awareness to the citizens and the masses of the potential dangers of having a centralized one world government. The worldwide military peace plan, which is Starlink and Space Force, will, in comparison, create a system of devolution for the citizens whilst providing superior cybersecurity and digital protection. And each member country or region will be monitored for its adherence to the operational codes of conduct and policies by the other regions and countries in the Space Force setup worldwide. And this will create a worldwide peace plan to ensure that countries deliver peace not only through their interactions with other regions and countries, but also maintaining peace with their own citizens, and to not abide by the agreed policies and procedures and protocols would be to risk being locked out of the quantum virtual vault and the peacekeeping facilities in cyberspace, communications and energy, for example. To not adhere would disrupt a region's ability to interact with the rest of the world financially in trade, for example, and possible severe disruptions to communications and internet, which would be disabled and would disable their banking and communications in that region. So the worldwide peace plan will be overseen in each region by a commander-in-chief from the Q team. So I asked them again to explain what is the difference between, say, a one world government in the Agenda 2030 versus the Space Force Worldwide Military Peace Plan, which could be linked to Project 25, which is the transition template to the new setup. They said that the one world government, which was the plan under Agenda 2030, is no longer an option, as the white hats have successfully infiltrated all aspects of this plan, and they have reversed the strategy to enable freedom and sovereignty rather than control. They said effectively, all the parts of the one world government were taken and flipped in the opposite direction. So it's the same system, but with a different intention and different people overseeing it. The one world government plan of Agenda 2030 was a system that was devised by the elites and no elected officials, and they effectively wanted to take control of humanity for their own gain. And this would have led to citizens not owning anything, a lack of movement in travel and transportation, and control through a credit score system attached to a digital form of currency. They said that voting would have been centralized, with the elites choosing who would be available to be elected into the positions of authority, and so effectively it would have been a rigged system. There would be no obvious accountability for the action or inaction of those in authority, which would then lead to gross corruption and miscarriages of justice. And all natural food and medicine would have been suppressed in favor of nanotechnology, irrespective of whether it heals and repairs in all situations. Under the Agenda 2030, freedom of speech would not have been visible with increased censorship if it went against the elite's plan, if it went against their plan to control and govern the people. And that innovation and technology would only have been allowed and developed with the intention to control and coerce the masses. Now, in comparison to that, the system that we are currently operating is called the Worldwide Military Peace Plan, which is overseen by Space Force. And they're saying that this is overseen by the White Hats and the Q team, who are the superior cybersecurity systems worldwide, and they're operated by the White Hat military and overseen by the Q team. It's a system for allowing freedoms in choosing policy and not people, choosing freedom over control, and the abolition of war programs. Digital currency will be backed by assets from the virtual vault, plus there will be decentralized governance, meaning the abolition of top-heavy corrupt government systems that are cumbersome and often lack responsiveness to local needs of communities and the needs of the citizens. Under the Worldwide Military Peace Plan, they intend to have open borders using digital ID and quantum passports, and new innovations, technology, and freedom of time and pleasure, with transport systems being designed for speed and pleasure. And the Department of Homeland Security are the people that have produced the document that I was referring to earlier called Continuity of Government. I said, will they be restructured under this transition process or Project 25? And they said, yes. I said, what is the purpose of the restructuring of the Department of Homeland Security? They said that the future of open borders, quantum borders, will mean that the DHS, or the Department of Homeland Security, will need to restructure to interface with new cybersecurity methods of managing immigration and travel in and out of the USA by visitors. So I asked them, what is the quantum border? They said a quantum border is an open border where traffic or travelers are monitored or overseen worldwide by the Delta cybersecurity. There will be no need in the future to queue for long periods at border control, and new biometric systems will create a faster, more streamlined process. And even the paper passporting system will become obsolete longer term as old passporting and identification systems are scrapped. And I said, what will replace the old passporting systems? He said, in the future, passporting and identification of citizens will travel will be through biometric information. I then wanted to know, how will the USA look during this sort of intense year of the dragon, Chinese year of the dragon in 2024? And what is the strategy behind removing Trump from the ballot papers? They said that Trump being removed from ballot papers in some states, whilst remaining in other states, will produce an untenable, unconstitutional situation for the elections of November 24 in the USA. So this, along with other unconstitutional acts or situations arising throughout 2024, will cause the election to be postponed, effectively leaving the USA without leadership, and military law will be in place to help deliver the continuity of governance. So finally, I asked them, are we going to be heading into any war in any other areas? They did say that we won't be going into any more wars, but they said that Israel is a cleaning up operation and that other random events may be seen, like oil field attacks, for example, because they said that they're trying to get these assets tied into the quantum virtual vault. So if in some regions the assets still have not been fully accounted for, then we could see random attacks on, say, for example, oil fields, while they get those assets quantified and added to the quantum virtual vault. So they're not saying exactly that there's going to be wars, but there could be random events that could be possible because they're trying to get these assets and quantify them. They did say that during the year of the dragon, the energy is going to be very commanding, and so there are going to be many changes, and these changes will be imposed worldwide to move into the worldwide peace plan so that it becomes something that's front and center. So if you want to hear more about the Year of the Dragon, please go and see the video that I've recently put together about this year, this Chinese year. And there's going to be a lot of change, very dramatic, very forceful. And I hope you've really enjoyed all this information today, and I'll see you next time.